Hey, what's up? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing another romance recommendations video. It's actually been about 6 months since I did my last romance recommendations video, and these are videos that I do from time to time on this channel. I feel like honestly within the last year or 2 years I've been kind of drifting away from romance. I used to be quite the avid romance reader back when I was just starting my reading journey in 2014 to about 2018. I used to read a ton of romance, but within the last few years I feel like I've definitely been drifting more towards thriller and horror books. But I do still have quite a number of romance recommendations from these romance books that I've read over the last 6 months, and I've found some romance books that I absolutely love, like some new all-time faves. But before we do jump into the video, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Confessions of a Rebel for sponsoring today's video. Confessions of a Rebel is a new fragrance line that's all about celebrating the spirit of rebelliousness that exists in each of us. Something that I think is really unique about Confessions of a Rebel is they blend traditionally feminine notes with traditionally masculine notes, so you get a lot of fragrances that are really unique. All their fragrances are vegan and cruelty-free, and they go straight to the source for their ingredients. And the fragrances also have some really amazing names, like Morning After, Let's Be Real, Love High, Get a Room, Almost Single, Fuck Mondays, About Last Night, and Bitch Please. One of the fragrances I received this time is this new one, Let's Be Real, and they sent me the full bottle size of this one, and these bottles are pretty huge, to be honest. These are pretty good sized perfume bottles. And this one I really enjoy. This one is traditionally more feminine, but men do love it as well. It has the keynotes of jasmine, tonka bean, vanilla, and cashmere woods. And then they did send me the travel size of Morning After, and this one is traditionally more masculine, but women love it as well, and I love the scent of this. This is probably my favorite scent that I've received from Confessions of a Rebel so far. This one has keynotes of Italian lemon, lavender, and tonka bean. It just smells so lovely. It smells like a really good cologne, but I also just really love it. But this Morning After one has been my go-to scent. I really love that even though this one is a travel size, it's still freaking huge! And I love that all of their perfumes are unisex. They don't really market these as either for women or for men. They're just for everyone. So yeah, make sure to use my code GABBY to get 20% off your Confessions of a Rebel fragrance. Act now, confess later. And thank you so much once again to Confessions of a Rebel for sponsoring today's video. And now, without any further ado, let's get into the romance books. Alright, so the first book that I wanted to recommend to you is one of my front runners for my favorite romance of 2021, and that is Hang the Moon by Alexandria Bellafleur. This one is actually a sequel to Written in the Stars, which is one of my favorite romance books that I read last year, but this one can be read as a standalone. This one follows this guy named Brendan and this girl named Annie. It takes place in Seattle, and it does have bisexual representation in Annie and its own voices. And not gonna lie, it kind of surprised me that I ended up enjoying this as much as I did, because it's not necessarily friends to lovers, but they've known each other since they were kids, because she's really best friends with his sister, and so that's kind of how he knows her in the first place, and he's kind of always known her growing up. But now she's coming back to Seattle because she's been traveling and doing her own thing, and she's coming back to Seattle to come and spend time with her best friend, and then he's also around. And I just loved this. I feel like I read this at the most perfect time, because this book is a love letter to Seattle, and there's so many different mentions of all these cool iconic things that you can do in Seattle. And I had actually read this on the day that I first went to Pike Place for the first time, and I had just done a lot of the things that they actually do in this book, so it was just a match made in heaven, perfect timing that I read this book, and I think that increased my love for it. And I just really love this author. I love her writing style. I love her characters. She just makes me give a shit, And she actually writes characters that have really good chemistry, and they're just so cute, and you'll just be giddy and smiling the entire time you read her books. Next book that I think is also a front runner to be my favorite romance book of 2021 is The Charm Offensive. And this one was sent to me as an art copy. This one actually goes on sale September 7th though, so very soon. And look at how cute. The publisher sent these cute little character cards with it, adorable. This book, oh my gosh, this is a male-male romance. It follows this one guy, Charlie, and this other guy named Dev. Charlie is going to be the equivalent of the new Bachelor. It's not directly called The Bachelor, but the idea is the same, that it's going to be a Bachelor-like show. and Charlie's going to be the lead, and then he starts to fall for his male producer Dev instead of any of the women on the show. Definitely gave me the same vibes as like Red, White, and Royal Blue because of the way that they're both like in the eye of the public. But this book, it not only has like one of the cutest, softest romances that I've ever read in my life, but it also has some really great characters. Like Charlie and Dev are people who feel so real to me, and I appreciate the discussion about mental illness in this book and mental health, because both of these main characters in this book deal with different mental health problems, and I think the discussion of mental health problems in romance books is amazing. This was just so cute. It was just one of my favorite things that I've ever read, and these characters will stay on my mind forever, and I can't wait until I can reread this book. Like, it's gonna happen soon. The next one I wanted to recommend is The X Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and this one is just the cutest thing. This one also takes place in Seattle. Like, what the heck? That's so cool, all these romances taking place in Seattle. This one follows this girl Shay, and she's been working at this radio station for like the past 10 years, and now this new guy Dominic is like coming up onto the scene, and she can't stand him, and there's actually like a pretty big age gap between them if I remember correctly. Like, she's a little bit older than he is because she's been working there for like 10 years, and he's like fresh out of college, like coming up in here trying to be a hot shot, and so they can't really stand each other at work, and their radio show isn't doing very well. Like, they're just really low on listeners and numbers and things like that. So she comes up with this idea to have this new segment on the radio show called The X Talk, where they would invite two exes to come onto the show and kind of talk about how their relationship went wrong, and it would be like fun and cute and bantery. The radio station can't afford to hire like exes and like real exes to do this, so they decide that they want Shay and Dominic to pretend to be fake exes. And so it's like we get a little twist on the fake dating trope because they never even fake dated in the first place. They're just pretending to be exes. But it's so cute because they're hate to love, like, or it's not like a hate to love, but they definitely have that like banter of a hate to love, which I just absolutely loved in this. And it's just so cute, you know, because like they have to get to know each other well enough to be able to pretend to be exes. And this book honestly made me want to start a podcast so bad. Like, I just loved the talk of podcasts in this and like the behind the scenes. And I actually really related to Shay's character, like in her struggles with not feeling like a real adult. So yeah, I loved this. It's incredible. It's amazing. It's one of my faves. And then we have People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. This is another one that completely surprised me that I love it as much as I do, because this is a friends to lover romance, and that is my least favorite romance trope, question mark. It's just something that I don't usually enjoy, but I think the reason why I enjoyed it in this one is because we're following these two characters, Alex and Poppy, and they're like best freaking friends, you know? Every year since college when they met, they've taken a vacation together every summer, and it's kind of like their thing. But now it's been about 10 years since college, and they're taking a vacation for the first time in a little while because things have not been that great between them and they haven't seen each other in a while. And so you kind of spend this book trying to figure out like what happened between them. So there's almost this like, not mystery, but like you're kind of curious, like, you know, what happened between them. So that keeps you interested. And it also does show in flashbacks how they met in college. So I feel like my issue usually with friends to lovers is that we don't usually see the beginning of like their friendship and relationship. And that's something that I really like to see, to be able to root for a couple, you know, like I want to see the beginning. And so I like in this book that we did see the beginning, and we kind of follow in flashback chapters, we follow the year that this is happening, like the 10th year when they're going to take a vacation together again. And then in flashback chapters, every other chapter, we see all of the other 10 vacations that they've taken over the years. So this is just like the most fun escapism, you know? You get to feel like you're on a freaking beachy vacation when you're reading this. And it also just has one of the cutest romances ever. Like, oh my god, I adore Alex with my whole fucking soul. I just loved him. He's so soft, precious. Oh, cinnamon roll. He's just so cute. Oh my gosh. Like, I cannot wait to reread this book. Like, this is one that I can see myself wanting to reread like all the time. The next book that I wanted to recommend is Honey Girl. I feel like this is one that is getting a little bit like tad mismarketed a little bit, because the premise of this book describes itself as this woman Grace gets her PhD in astronomy, and then one weekend she goes to Vegas and randomly marries this girl that's like a stranger. And then it's kind of like a romance about what happens after Vegas and how they like deal with their lives together. And while it is that, I will say this book is a lot more, it feels almost like it's written in a more like literary fiction style. Like, it's a lot more deep than the typical romances, like the mainstream romances that you might read. And I feel like not only is there like a really beautiful female-female romance happening in this book and like these two strangers just like trying to get to know each other, but it also feels like a really beautiful coming of age story for Grace and how she's like dealing with her family and different things like that. Like, it definitely feels more of a character study kind of romance on Grace, and then there's also some romance on the side. So like the romance isn't the main thing happening in this book, but the romance is also really beautiful and really stunning. And this one also has a radio show mentioned in the book, if I remember correctly. Like, there's like some kind of radio or podcast or something like that, and also the New York City vibes, you know, because Grace's love interest lives in New York City. The next book I would recommend is Actor Age Eve Brown, even though I will admit that this is probably my least favorite out of the Brown sisters books, because Get a Life Chloe Brown was a really great book, and then Take a Hint Danny Brown is my favorite out of the three, and then this one I felt like for me personally it was just okay, but I still do think that this is a book worth recommending, especially if you enjoy the previous two books. And this one we're following Eve Brown. She's the youngest of the three sisters, and then it's about how she's falling for this guy named Jacob who owns this bed and breakfast. And something that I really did like about this book is the setting of the bed and breakfast for most of the book. I just thought it was like a really cute setting and atmosphere. I feel like for me personally, I enjoyed the first half of this book a lot more than the second half of this book, and that's because the first half of this book, they have some of the best banter and just like some of the best chemistry, you know, and then the second half of this book, I feel like it becomes a lot of really repetitive sex scenes, which, you know, it just personally isn't my favorite thing to read about. And then the next book I wanted to recommend was Dial A for Aunties, and I know that this one could be seen as more of a like mystery and like a thriller as well, but I feel like this one is more of a romance book. Like, at the end of the day, the romance is like the main part of this story. The story's super entertaining, so if you're looking for something a little bit more in your romance, like a little bit extra, then I highly recommend Dial A for Aunties. It was so much fun. In this book, we're following this main protagonist. She gets set up on this blind date by all of her aunties. On the blind date, the guy dies, and she has to like deal with trying to figure out what to do with him. And in this book, we just kind of get this like cozy mystery vibes, because like her aunties have to come in and help her deal with the situation. And also there's this really cute romance happening throughout this book with a guy from her past that she still has feelings for. And so the romance is the thing that you're rooting for throughout the entire story, but then there's this mystery of like what's going on and all these like twists and turns with what's happening with this dead guy. But at the end of the day, it is a really cute romance book, and I would definitely consider this to be more of a romance than a mystery. So there you go. Gosh, and then I read the book What If You and Me, and this was the biggest surprise, because I went into this like having no idea what it was even about, and then it became one of my favorite romance books that I've ever read. So in this book, we're following this protagonist. She's a female and she's a horror author. Hell yes, that is so cool. I don't think I've ever read a romance book with a horror author as the protagonist. And then her love interest is Hill Dawson, and he's a retired firefighter, and they're next door neighbors. And just everything about this book is just so precious. I just really loved the fact that she loved horror so much. I feel like it's so rare in romance novels to see a female protagonist who just absolutely loves horror and just wants to talk about horror all the time, and it was just so refreshing to see that in a book. And also their relationship was just so cute. Like, Hill Dawson is one of my favorite male protagonists that I've ever read in a book, because he's so soft and he always will ask her for consent. Like, it is not even a question, he will ask her for consent every time, and I think that's so beautiful, and I love that. The only complaint that I have about this book is that I do think the end conflict was just a tad lame, you know, a tad cheesy, just like not the best. But besides that, this book was just a bundle of joy. It was so great. I actually did listen to this one on audio, and I have no complaints about it. Like, I loved this book so much. It was so good. I don't know how more people aren't talking about this book. I haven't seen it anywhere. And then the next book I wanted to recommend is 7 Days in June, and this one is another really beautiful romance novel that also kind of feels like it's written in a way that's more heavy than a typical like mainstream romance book. I feel like this could be categorized as more like contemporary literary fiction and also romance, but I checked on Goodreads and romance actually is the first genre listed, so that's why I felt like I needed to include it on this list, because at the center of this story is the most beautiful ass romance between these two characters, Shane and Eva. And so we jump back and forth in time. We get to see those 7 days that they had together when they were younger, and then like 15 years later in the future when she has a child, and their lives are just so different. Like, they've both been through so much. And I really love the writing style, you know, the way we're able to jump back and forth in time, so we can see them in the past, we can see them now. This book kind of reminded me of Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino, just for that reason alone, just because we're jumping back and forth between 15 years of time. I also loved that both of these characters are writers. Like, I just especially love reading books that are about writers, and especially in romance books like this. And the chemistry that Shane and Eva had, oh my god, it was like jumping off the page. The next book that I read is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, and this is one of the very few, if only, Tessa Bailey books that I've enjoyed. I really wanted to read this book because it said it's a Schitt's Creek inspired rom-com, and what it means by that is that we're following this girl Piper, who is very much like Alexis in Schitt's Creek, like very much so, same kind of vibe. She's this super rich girl who gets cut off from her money and her wealth, and she has to go live in a very small town in Washington. You know, another romance that takes place in Washington. And then when she goes to this small town, she meets this grumpy local man named Brendan, and she starts to have this cute little like romance with him, you know? And this character is so similar to Alexis from Schitt's Creek. Like, she just gave me those vibes so strongly. Like, this is a very accurate comparison for this character, and that just made me love this book so much because I miss watching Schitt's Creek every day with all of my heart and soul. And so it was really nice to be able to, you know, imagine this character to be kind of like Alexis, and it definitely reminded me a lot of The Simple Wild, actually, just because I feel like it has that same energy of like this girl coming to a small town and falling for the grumpy local dude. But it was just so cute, and the only complaint that I have about this book is it's another me thing, you know? It's that the second half of this book starts to just feel like sex scene after sex scene after sex scene, and it feels like the plot is just kind of like slowly moving along. But besides that, it was a really beautiful story. I actually just really loved both of these characters. And then I have one of my most recent reads on this whole list, and that is The Heart Principle by Helen Huang. This book is the third book in her, you know, Kiss Quotient series, and I will warn you that this book is sad and depressing as fuck. And I feel like I do need to warn you because I feel like the first two books in the series are pretty lighthearted, you know, pretty steamy, like fun books. But this book is heavy, and it's sad, and it's depressing, and it made me cry so much, and I just wasn't expecting that, so I feel like I should let you know, if you're not in a very good mental place, to not pick this book up, because I personally wasn't in a really good mental place when I read this, and this book shattered me. Like, it was so hard to read. It was just too much, you know? It was too much for me at the time. This book, we're following this woman named Anna Sun, and she is a violinist. This is her romance with Quan, who is one of my favorite characters in this Kiss Quotient universe, and so I was very excited to read this, you know? And the romance in this book is absolutely beautiful, okay? Don't let me steer you or put you off from reading this book because the romance is stunning. I just want you to know that this book is a lot heavier than I was personally anticipating. But this book is not only a really beautiful romance with Quan, but it's also this really beautiful story for Anna to kind of find her voice and figure out things about herself that she never knew before. Just, you know, it's just a really beautiful, touching story about Anna's life, and then there's also this really great romance happening with Quan in this book. Like, I was already crying my eyes out at the end of this book, and then I read the author's note at the very end of this book, and then I just cried even more. So yeah, you've been warned. But it's a great book. It's a really beautiful ass romance. If you need a good cry, there you go. I will say two romance books that I have on my TBR that I wanted to get to in time for this video, but I didn't, is The Royals Next Door by Karina Hall. This is one that I just barely started the other night. I'm only on to chapter 4, and I'm really enjoying this so far. This one is about this girl named Piper as well. You know, that's like a really common name I find in romance books, but I don't think I've ever met anyone in real life named Piper. Anyway, that's besides the point. This one follows this woman named Piper who's an elementary school teacher, and she lives on this little island in Canada, and then this royal family, like the prince and the princess, move next door to her, and then it's a romance between her and their bodyguard. So, you know, really interested in reading this. I hope it's as cute as it sounds, and can't wait to get to it soon. And then also, you know, The Love Hypothesis. This one just looks so cute because it's a romance between these two scientists who fake date, and it just sounds like it's gonna be everything I need in a romance, so very much looking forward to reading both of these. Anyways, yeah, those are all of the romance recommendations I have for you today. Let me know if you also enjoy any of these romance books. Let me know of any romances that you think I would enjoy, whether they're traditionally published or if they're indies. Just let me know. And thank you so much for watching this video, as always, and thanks for hanging out, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye.